Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of my Nostalgia Trip Games. This time, I'm gonna do something a bit different, because in the absence of any real means of recording unemulated MS-DOS gaming footage, I decided to go for a Windows 95-98 kind of an episode, which still is sort of in the realm of retro gaming, seeing as Windows 98 was released over 20 years ago already. So I'm gonna go with first 5 games for Windows 95 and 98 that I can think of. Enjoy.
Back in the day, probably in early 1997, I was buying my first original PC games with a friend of mine, and Big Red Racing was one of the games included in the bundle, because we got so excited about the freedom of driving off the course that the single track in the demo version showed. The juvenile, largely stereotypical humorous phrases played at every possible spot also appealed to us back then.
Gosh, how thirsty. I feel like drinking a gallon of turpentine.
Big Red Racing features 24 courses from around the world, and in the outer space even. And there are 6 cups to race and win if you're into torturing yourself. Each course will feature 2 or 3 different vehicles to choose from, and you can change the color of your vehicle and clothes, as well as the persona of the driver. The real meat of the game, however, is in finding out hidden passages and landmarks way off the course, when there are any. Which is one of the reasons why we got into this game in the first place. "23 years on, Big Red Racing offers nothing of real value other than nostalgia. The juvenile, stereotypical humor gets annoying before I even launch the game. The jittery 3D graphics and lousy controls don't really help the driving experience even on the most playable tracks. And most importantly, the usual lack of a second player who can appreciate the game's nostalgia value makes Big Red Racing a hard game to love." The original Lode runner was released on probably hundreds of different platforms, and it would take a while to catalog all the versions available. Which, by the way, is exactly the reason why I haven't done a comparison of it for my blog. My personal favorite has always been the mid-90s Lode Runner games released for Windows and Macintosh computers. The first of these two, Lode Runner The Legend Returns, was also released for the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation, but the second one, Lode Runner Online, The Mad Monk's Revenge, dropped the Saturn and PlayStation releases. Although I enjoyed both games equally, there is a clue in the game's name why I chose the latter one over the prior. I remember having played Lode Runner Online against a friend using 2 PCs connected together with an RJ45 cable to build a small local area network, and then we'd be able to play games using the TCP, IP, or LAN option. Lode Runner Online is also a standalone expansion to the previous game. Similarly to The Legend Returns, you could also build your own levels in the Mad Monk's Revenge, and the original set of levels is expanded, as is the ending of the game, if you ever bothered to play that far. Perhaps most importantly, on the long run though, Lode Runner Online had the original 16-bit code updated to 32-bit code, so it could be played on Windows 95 as well. One of the reasons why I became such a firm supporter of Windows as a gaming platform was the army of great independent game developers that had original ideas, which is something you rarely saw on consoles. For many, it was really the only logical step forwards from developing for MS-DOS. In Finland, we had many such indie talents, and one of my most played games on Windows 95 and 98 was I've Got Some Balls by Sebastian Aaltonen. It's a ball-rolling platformer in 3D, viewed from behind and above the metallic ball you control, and the idea is to collect the required amount of jewels in each level to open up the goal portal before you can exit the level, and hope to get a record time while at it. Obviously, this was a good format for grinding, as it's now called. The game was originally released as shareware, and if I remember correctly, the unregistered version only featured maybe 5 or 6 levels. The full game, which was made freeware a few years later, features 17 official levels and a compiler for players who want to make their own levels. For me though, the game has always been more about grinding than creation. More independent games. In 1997, a Hungarian developer by the name of Balázs Rózsa created the game franchise that I claim to have spent the most time ever with, perhaps until very recently. The first game in the series was called Action SuperCross, an oddball motorbike trials platforming kind of a game for MS-DOS, and it was released as shareware, with the full version orderable as a diskette. The thing is, most of my PC gaming friends in my area used to play the sequel Elasto Mania just as much as Action SuperCross back in the day, and because it's basically the same game, I had to include them both here. To be honest, I really don't play either of these games anymore because I got such an overdose from them back then. The basic idea is to ride your bike in a very two-dimensional environment, collect all the apples in the level and find the exit item, which looks like a flower. To change direction, you need to press the spacebar and your bike will magically alter its heading towards the opposite direction with a funny effect that emphasizes the two-dimensional style of the game. The graphics are crude but functional, and the sounds are just bike noises and a couple of other sound effects, no music. It's all very simplistic, but it wouldn't work that well any other way. Compared to Action SuperCross, Elastomania has a huge bunch of new tracks, updated graphics, and a nice level editor. It even featured a more player-friendly system to modify graphics. Both Action SuperCross and Elastomania evoked such a huge underground following that a website was built to keep track of record times as well as store new graphics files and custom tracks. These were easily the most played games in our area, as I said, over a maybe 5 or 6 year period. Oddly enough, after the recent re-emerged interest in trial bikes gaming on various platforms, Elastomania has returned in the form of an official sequel in 2017, which I have yet to test properly, since I only found about it a couple of days ago actually. The official website still looks like it was the year 2000, which only adds to the nostalgia value of it. Up until the turn of the millennium, Activision used to publish lots of inventive and original games. Mikada's Gearhead Garage, the virtual mechanic, was one of the last ones of such caliber. As the subtitle says, the game puts you into the shoes of a mechanic whose choice of career gets you working on cars in varyingly bad conditions, and in order to get paid well, you need to get the car under maintenance fixed with as little extra cost as possible and as quickly as possible. As you make progress and earn more money, you get to rebuild your own cars from miserable conditions to shiny new things, and even paint them and stick some decals on them if you wish. Unfortunately, Gearhead Garage lacks a driving mode, which is what really kills the game's lasting appeal. What Gearhead Garage managed to do, though, was to make tinkering with cars appealing and interesting to us nerdy gaming type folk, even more than Street Rod from almost 10 years prior. It's basically the same thing without the racing bit, but with the mechanic bit emphasized. I still like this better than the modern equivalents, Car Mechanic Simulator and Automation, but that's because I don't really like real simulators as much as these kinds of light versions.